Questions for oral answer. I call on Government Orders of the Day numbers 1 to 20.
Courts Amendment Bill, third reading. Land Transport Amendment Bill, third reading. Summary Proceedings Amendment Bill number 3, third reading. Children, Young Persons and Their Families Amendment Bill number 2, third reading. Crimes Amendment Bill number 4, third reading. Criminal Proceeds Recovery Amendment Bill, third reading. Customs and Excise Amendment Bill number 2, third reading. Disputes Tribunals Amendment Bill number 2, third reading. Family Courts Amendment Bill, third reading. Immigration Amendment Bill, third reading. Misuse of Drugs Amendment Bill number 3, third reading. Misuse of Drugs Amendment Act 1978 Amendment Bill. Personal Property Securities Amendment Bill number 2. Prisoners and Victims Claims Amendment Bill, third reading. Privacy Amendment Bill number 2, third reading. Railways Amendment Bill, third reading. Residential Tenancies Amendment Bill number 3, third reading. Sentencing Amendment Bill number 5, third reading. Social Security Amendment Bill number 4, third reading. Tax Administration Amendment Bill, third reading.
The Honourable Simon Power.
Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the Minister for Courts, I move that the 20 bills divided from the Courts and Criminal Matters Bill be now read a third time. Mr. Speaker, these bills have been divided from the Courts and Criminal Matters Bill and as such represent possibly the most comprehensive reform of the enforcement of fines, reparation and civil debt in over a decade. As at 30 June 2011, $666.5 million in fines, including reparation, await collection. Although this is $112 million less than when the bill was introduced nearly 15 months ago, further efforts are needed if fines are to remain a credible sanction for breaches of the law. Regular surveys of the public perception of courts find that half of respondents believe that offenders can avoid paying their reparation or fines. This legislation will modernise the collection of fines and introduce new enforcement tools to encourage people to voluntarily pay their fines and reparation. Policy development commenced under the previous Minister for Courts, the Honourable Rick Barker, in 2007, and the Government acknowledges and recognises that. The present Minister for Courts, the Honourable Georgina Tahihu, has expanded the scope of the legislative reforms, particularly to address inconsistencies across the relevant legislation. The amendments to the Summary Proceedings Act 1957 establish a single comprehensive definition of fine, which includes all court-imposed sentences and orders of reparation, court-imposed fines, infringement penalties filed at court for enforcement, court costs, and of course the offender levy. Cross-references to this definition are then inserted into the other principal fines enforcement legislation. The legislation also aligns the provisions relating to payment of monetary penalties from the sale of proceeds of seized, confiscated and forfeited property across 4 acts: the Summary Proceedings Act, the Sentencing Act 2002, the Misuse of Drugs Act 1975 and of course the Criminal Proceeds Recovery Act 2009, to ensure that all monetary penalties can be paid out of these proceeds and that priority is given to the payment of reparation. Mr. Speaker, the bill introduces 3 new enforcement tools to encourage those with overdue fines and reparation to pay or enter into an appropriate payment arrangement. First, the bill allows the amount of a person's overdue fines to be released to the credit reporting industry and in turn authorises the Ministry of Justice to use updated addresses and other information supplied by credit reporters for fines enforcement. Second, the bill gives the courts, in effect, super priority over secured creditors for the sale proceeds of seized goods where a person has unpaid fines and a creditor lends them money to buy an asset, for example a car, which is used as security for the debt. Third, amendments to the Land Transport Act 1998 enable the Ministry of Justice to impose a driver licence stop order which suspends any driver licence of an individual with overdue traffic fines or, if they do not have a driver's licence, prevents them getting one. The amendments to the Sentencing Act will enable the courts to re-sentence a person who has not complied with a sentence or order of reparation, drawing on the full range of alternative sentencing options that were available for the original offence. The bill also clarifies that payment of reparation has priority over payment of other fines when distributing funds recovered from the sale of seized, forfeited and confiscated property under the acts identified earlier, which is consistent with the Government's response to the Law Commission's report on compensating crime victims. Finally, this legislation will improve enforcement processes importantly for judgment debtors and creditors. In particular, the amendments to the District Courts Act 1947, the Disputes Tribunals Act 1988 and the Residential Tenancies Act 1986 will make it easier to establish an attachment order to make deductions from a person's salary, wage or benefit to resolve an outstanding judgment debt as determined by a court or a tribunal. The long course of this legislation, Mr. Speaker, means that there are many people I would like to acknowledge for their contribution to this legislation, including officials from a range of departments: the Parliamentary Council Office, the Law Commission, local authorities, the Judiciary, the Privacy Commissioner, representatives of the credit reporting industry, the former Minister of Courts, the Honourable Rick Barker, my colleague, the Honourable Georgina Tahuhu, and all those who made submissions to assist the Law and Order Committee in its consideration. Mr. Speaker, the reforms contained in this bill will enhance the credibility of monetary penalties as alternatives to prison or community-based sentences and reduce the compliance costs of using the civil debt recovery system. Mr. Speaker, I commend this legislation to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable Rick